Okay, we'll get started here. Good late morning. Thank you for joining us and joining our seminar today. McClanny is very pleased to sponsor this session entitled "What Dairy Financial Success on Your what drives financial success on your dairy." I'll get it right. I'm Renee Schrift. I'm with McClanahan Corporation. We're based out of Pennsylvania. We like to think that we do contribute to the financial side because of the recycling of the sand and the bedding and helping dairies to improve their cow comfort, helping them with their bedding quality so they have more success on the production side, make more money. So it is a great pleasure for us to sponsor this. I thought it was very fitting and very excited to see Steve was on the program. I've known Steve for a while. So Steve Bodart is with Compeer Financial. He's a senior dairy consultant who focuses his work on commercial dairy operations that have grown, expanded their businesses. Steve assists farmers with business and financial planning, performance monitoring, integrating the production and the financial management together. He also brings two decades of knowledge as a former CFO of a commercial dairy in Wisconsin, and also with his deep understanding of family dairy business that he brings to the table. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Steve, and again, it's a pleasure to be able to sponsor this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. It's a pleasure to be in front of everyone and have this opportunity to talk to you today. I'm surprised to have this big crowd. When we talk finances, generally everybody gets pretty bored and looks for the back door. So, but you know, the topic today is what drives the success of a dairy. When we look at it from the financial aspect, is where we want to cover today. And so, you know, when we look at dairying, it's kind of like Moneyball, the game of baseball. People think that the people that have the biggest checks, can buy the most expensive people are always the ones that win. That's not necessarily the way it is. There are things that each of us can do regardless of the size, the scope of our business, regardless of how big our wallets are, that can help the profitability of our business. And that's what we want to explore today and bring out in front of you is what can we do to enhance your business. So the agenda that I have today, basically it's in three different parts. The first one is just the evolution of the dairy industry. Second part is what we did, and then some key takeaways that I'll share at the end. So where is the dairy industry at? If we look at the dairy industry today, we're basically sitting there with about 37,000 dairymen in the United States as of today. That is a 7% decline from what we had the end of 2017. And that's been on a pretty continual decline, the number of dairies that are out there. As of August, we were sitting with 9.32 million cows in the U.S. That is down 1% from a year ago. And yet, while our cow numbers are down, our milk production in the first 8 months of this year is exactly the same as what we produced last year. So our cows are becoming more efficient again this year. If we look at what is forecasted for us right now for the rest of this year, and for a year average, we're forecasted for a mailbox price of $18.30. And then as we look into 2020, what has actually been published or estimated value for our milk is $18.80. So as we look at these things and look at what does that mean for us, a few things that we know that are occurring. Labor costs have continued to rise, making our environment more challenging. Feed costs continue to rise. Anybody that's from the upper Midwest knows the challenges we've had with forage production this year. And so that tends to be a variable that we're dealing with, and energy costs are on a slight increase also. While feed costs and other inputs are on the rise, with the milk price that's out there, our margins look to be a little bit better for the remainder of this year and into 2020 than what we had in 2017 and in 2018. We are seeing that the pipeline of milk is starting to slow. We're seeing that cheese inventories are getting tighter. We're also seeing that the world pipeline is slowing, and which is all good for the dairy industry. Means we have more opportunities out there. And there is the odd opportunity right now to have positive earnings as we look into 2020, based on what we know today. But we want to further enhance those profit margins, and that's why we're here today. Along with these things, if we look over the last decade, some of the other things that we see is, there's been a consolidation in the dairy industry that has continued forever, and I don't see any time that will slow down. But we continue to consolidate the industry. Our herds get larger. The number of herds get less. There's a globalization of the dairy markets. We're in the world market. We need to know what's going on here. We need to know what's going on in across the ocean, whether it be New Zealand, Australia, whether it be Europe, wherever it is, where those major prices are or players are. We also need to recognize that our demand for domestic products continues to change. People's appetites are changing. People's demand, the products that they're looking for, are different today than where they have been in the past. Those things play into what are we going to produce? What do we do? Okay? And we're also going to be in a world where there's significant volatility. That volatility is going to occur on both the input side and on the output side. In the past, there's been times where we've concentrated on what is the absolute price, and we need to focus on margins and not absolute price. That's what we're here to talk about today, is focusing on margins. So what do we do as we put this study together? So what we wanted to do is we wanted to look and see if there are specific dairy production measures that we could tie in year after year with the financial success of the dairy. So how do we do this? So I work with Compeer Financial, as Renee had pointed out. Compeer Financial has been in the dairy consulting business since I believe it was 1998. With that, we are taking financial information from both our lending clients and our non-lending clients. We are making sure that it is accrual information. We're putting that together with production parameters to measure the financial success of our operations. With that, we do benchmarking on an ongoing basis with our clients. We do monitoring on a quarterly basis. We put budgets together for these clients to help them understand. We have a team of people within our consulting department that works through this. So what we did is we took the data that we have been putting together, our actual clients' data. It was scrubbed. It was not identified. So it was all blank as far as which farm is which. We took that data from 11 years, put it together. Those clients were from Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota, Michigan, and Ohio. And that data collection set started with 2006. We took that data, we did share that data with Zoetis blindly so that they could do some statistical analysis, regression analysis on that data to see if there was truly 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 production factors that had key impact on profitability of the dairy year after year. So that was the process that we started out with. And what we're really looking at was, is there a correlation coefficient or a relationship between A and B? When we start looking at correlation coefficients, they can vary from a +1 to a -1. Okay? Correlation does not necessarily equate causation. I do want to make sure that we understand that. It's not A equals definitely results in B. But if we have a correlation that can be positive, generally if we look at that, if one number increases, another number increases. In this case, if net farm income's an example, net farm income increases as milk production increased. That correlation can also be negative. An example that we throw up here is net farm income decreases as somatic cell increases. Or there could be no relationship whatsoever. And so we tried to look at these, and so where we started out with is we had 489 years of client data. Again, this was all accrual data that was put together that we analyzed. We were looking at 90 different variables. Some of them were production variables, some of them were financial variables that we were looking at. This represented 93 farms that we work with. There was a few farms that were censored from our analysis and removed. What would be one that was removed from the analysis? That would be removed from the analysis would be, an example is a dairy that I worked with that was calving for multiple farms. So he had all the dry cows and did all the calving. Once they were 20 days in milk, they're being sent out to multiple other locations. So his cost of production is going to be way different. So would the receiving dairies, their cost of production be way different than a typical Midwest dairy. So those dairies were censored and removed from the database that we used when we put this analysis together. It represents 11 calendar years that we looked at. The average farm in here had 5.3 years of data. Some of those dairies had 1 year, some of them would have had all 11 years been involved. Depends when we started working with the data, or we started working with the farm and when we started gathering that data. And the average farm had 1,087 milking cows. They did vary from a low of 95, and that is one farm with 1 year's worth of data that wanted to be in our database, up to 4,700 cows. Other than the one herd at 95 cows, I believe the next smallest herd in the analysis was right around 400 cows. So generally speaking, you could say from 4 to 4,700 is what we had. So as we look at that, this is what we see year after year, and how we did the evaluation was we looked at net farm income per hundredweight of milk. Over those 11 years, we averaged $1, I can't even remember my number now. We averaged $1.23 for our profit margin when we looked at it. But we did range from a loss of $5.37 a hundredweight in 1 year to profitability on one farm of $12.28 per hundredweight. Now the hundredweights that we're talking about are energy corrected hundredweights of milk. Because every farm has different components, different butter fat, different protein, we're standardizing those hundredweights in order to do an apples to apples analysis here. We could have done this on a per cow, we could have done it on a per herd, but we decided how we were going to evaluate was on a per hundredweight basis. Again, net farm income is an accrual number using management level depreciation. It's looking at your income minus your expenses plus depreciation to come up with earnings. Does not include principal payments. This is a true cost of production that we're looking at. Farm years accounted for 71% of the variation. Because we have differences in milk prices, we do have differences in earnings each and every year. Across those 11 years, I can tell you one thing. Every year, somebody made money. At least one person made money in every one of those 11 years. And in every one of those 11 years, somebody figured out a way to lose money. including 2014. Okay, so there's a lot of diversity that we see out there. Some years are good, some years are bad. The last few years have not been profitable years. Has put us in the position that some of us face today, trying to figure out our next move. So as we look at it, and if we subdivide it and look at what are the most profitable years, the most profitable years were 2007, 11, and 14. The average years were 8, 10, 12, and 13. And our years with our biggest loss was 6, 9, 15, and 16. You can see on this there is some differences in milk price between those three different groups, with our most profitable years also having our highest milk price. Okay? But we can also see that in our most profitable years we also had our highest feed costs. Our feed cost in our most profitable years was $10.20 as compared to our least profitable being at $9.30. The thing that I always find interesting, though, as I look at this, is how much milk we're able to produce. We get to a year with a loss, we get to a year with lower milk prices, and we let our production fall. And that to me is just, it's one of those things that I haven't quite figured out why we do that. I think it's we want to retract on expenses without figuring out how much of an impact it has on our income stream. But you can see here, in those least profitable years, our energy-corrected milk was lower. Our net farm income on an energy-corrected 100-weight of milk, our most profitable years was $4.05. Our least profitable 4 years was a negative 87 cents. As you work with your lenders, they probably are always pushing you on working capital. And you're always coming back and saying, why do you need working capital? This shows you why you need working capital. Our most profitable years, we have built working capital. We're sitting at over $1,100 of working capital. Our average year, we're sitting at $606. Our least profitable, we're sitting at $292. Or we're eroding that working capital. As we erode that working capital, we're more dependent on our lender. And so we need to have that buffer, that cushion there, so we can get through those tough times. We have returns on there. We have our cost of production on here. Our cost of production after owner draws was $16.71, $16.70, and $17.59. I'm not sure why this number got on here. Sorry about that. So when I look at the first thing that I see is, why is it in our least profitable years our cost of production is our highest? I again start to question that. Again, too often I see that we cheat on expenses, but our expenses go down a lot less than our revenue goes down. Our income over feed cost also varies, as you can see here. So we went through and looked at it and tried to look at what are those production factors that have a huge correlation with profitability and are consistent year after year. Not there one year and gone the next year. So again, looking at the 11 years of data that we had, again, from a positive to a negative correlation, and when you're dealing with field study works, anytime you start seeing a correlation of greater than 0.15, we consider that fairly significant. So the first one that we saw that had a positive correlation with net farm income was energy-corrected milk shipped per cow per day. And that had a positive correlation of a 0.15. Okay, so more milk means more profitability. Our preg rate, 21-day preg rate, a 0.14 positive correlation. As our preg rate improves, our profits improve because we have less days of milk. Heifer survival rate, okay? We need to keep our calves healthy. We need to keep all the heifers survival or alive. This is looking at heifer survival rate from birth until calving. This is not just wet calves, but a high correlation with profitability. Number of heifers, or how big our heifer inventory, are we sitting at 1 heifer per cow? Are we sitting at 1.1 heifers per cow? Or sitting at 0.7 heifers per cow? Had a 0.09 correlation, so less of a correlation with profitability. So not highly related to profitability, okay? Our total milk pounds shipped, this is on the total on the farm. So pounds of milk shipped for the farm has no relationship to profitability, 0.07. Herd size, again, very low correlation with profitability. Labor costs. I know everyone's going to say they don't agree with this, but labor costs is not necessarily at this point in time related to profitability. Does it mean we don't need to focus in on labor and figure out ways to manage our labor? No. But just to look at the overall dollars and say that that is related to profitability of the farm, we cannot say that directly. Death loss. This is death loss in the adult cows. Death loss, as death loss goes up, we're tending to start to see a bit of a negative correlation with profitability. 0.09 negative correlation there. Somatic cell, again, a negative correlation. As cell count is going up, milk quality is getting worse. We're seeing a decrease in profitability on the farms. And then net herd turnover cost. Okay, before anybody raises their hand to say, what in the world are you talking about here? What we're doing here is when we look at net herd turnover, we're looking at the adult herd. We're looking at the number of animals that leave the herd in a year's time. That could be left as a cull. It could be a dairy sale. It could be a dead animal. How many of those animals left? Times their balance sheet value, which is relatively close, or should be relatively close to what their cost of raising a heifer would be. In most of these cases, it was $1,700 that we had for our value of those cows, minus whatever we received for a salvage value. So if they're a dairy sale, we might have got $1,200, we might have got $1,500, maybe $2,000. If they're a cull cow, you might have got $500, $300, $200, who knows? And if they're dead, they probably got $0. So what's that net difference in dollars divided by the total 100 weights of milk, energy-corrected milk, shipped during that same time period? So it's really looking at the economic cost of turning over the herd. And we find that to be a very high correlation with profitability of the herd. So we'll go into each one of these and start showing why all these things relate to that high correlation with profitability. So if we start out with the energy corrected milk, again, that had that positive correlation of 0.15. Our top third, the most profitable third, when we looked at it from production, we're at 92.7 pounds versus the bottom third was at 72.7 pounds. And the difference in their cost, or their profitability, was 89 cents per hundredweight. Our 21-day preg risk, again with a 0.14 correlation. The best third were at 27% preg rate. The worst third was at 18. Difference in net farm income of 54 cents a hundredweight. Heifer survival, again a correlation of 0.16. On our best third, they were at 97.5% survival. The worst third was at 91, and the difference we saw in profitability in those farms was 82 cents a hundredweight. Age at first calving. You'll see we have some differences between our best and our worst, but because of confounding information each year, herds are getting better, getting their days down, It was hard to put it into a statistical analysis, so it just shows up there, but I don't have any difference in the cost of production. Death rate in the adult cows. Again, that had a negative correlation. Our best third was at 4.3% death loss. The worst third was at 10. Difference in cost of production, or difference in profitability, of 56 cents a hundredweight. Somatic cell, the negative correlation, a 132 to a 228, 64 cents difference in profitability per hundredweight. In net herd turnover, with that huge negative correlation, our best third was at 91 cents a hundredweight for that net herd turnover cost. Our worst third was at $1.99, and the overall difference in cost of production was $1.44. So why do these things occur? So we started out and we put on the somatic cell. When we see the cell count, again, that difference, the 132 to the 284, those herds also have a difference in milk production. The herds with the 132, on average, were at 88 pounds of milk, energy corrected. The third that were at the 284 were at 77.5 pounds of milk over those 11 years. The herds that had the higher somatic cell tended to also have a higher death loss. Again, a huge correlation there, 0.44. Cell count goes up, death loss was going up. Days open, as death loss went up, as cell count went up, the days open started to go up, 0.31. Negative correlation with profitability, negative correlation with preg rate. I guess if I look at the herds that I work with, where we had a cell count problem, it was hard to get the preg rate where we wanted until we got the cell count down. So a huge negative correlation of 0.25 and a very huge negative correlation with energy corrected milk of 0.41. So if we compare that difference on that top third versus the bottom third for cell count, the profitability difference that we saw average across those 11 years for that 1,087 cow herd was $173,000 per year. What does this mean? What it means based on what we are seeing shows to be a little bit more significant than what the university studies have shown. But basically we saw for every 100,000 increase in cell count, about a 5.5 pound decrease in milk production when we look at these actual farm herds. Energy corrected milk. If we look at just energy corrected milk and the ones with the top third, they're at 92.7 pounds versus that bottom third that were at 72.7. And had a huge difference there, huge difference in our profitability. The other things that we see is our highest milk production herds have a higher breeding cost. Now they have a higher breeding cost, but they also have a higher preg rate. So what does that mean to me? It means they're using better bulls. They're getting the cows settled and they're using the best bulls to continue to perpetuate the success of their herd. Some of it would be also there's more sex semen used on these herds. Profitability is there with more milk. Feed costs. If we look at our feed cost per 100 weight of energy corrected milk, negative correlation. That maintenance feed cost is getting diluted out over more pounds of milk, and so our feed cost is going down. Our days open, negative correlation. Our higher production herds have less days open. Our death loss is better in these high production herds, and our cell count is less. So when we look at those high production herds, the highest third, on average, they had a $209,000 advantage per year in profitability versus that bottom third. If we look at preg rate, the first thing I want to say on the preg rate is we did not gather that all 11 years. I did not have that for the first 4 to 5 years. We did not have that data. So it's only about 4 years worth of data that we have. So the database is a little more limited that we have here. But with that, again, as our preg rate improved, there was a fairly significant correlation with energy corrected milk, positive correlation with profitability, negative correlation with cell count and days open. So again, that improvement from a 27 preg rate versus that 18 was a $156,000 difference per year on that average herd that we work with. Death rate. Again, this is the death rate in the cows. High correlation in our herds that have higher cell count, they tend to also have higher death loss, a 0.45. Our herds with that higher cell count are turning cows a lot more often. Okay? So as we turn cows, as our cell count is higher, our cost of production is also going up and our profitability is deteriorating. The energy corrected milk is also looking less on those farms. So that difference there, 6% difference in death loss is resulting in $150,000 difference in profitability on these dairies each and every year. Okay, my friend, turnover of the adult herd. Huge, huge dollars that we're talking about here, okay? As turnover goes up, there's a huge correlation with cell count. We know nobody likes a high cell count, so they're turning cows, okay? Their cull rate is also higher. Their profitability is decreased. The energy corrected milk is decreased. The energy corrected milk, huge negative correlation of 0.46. The difference in profitability here that we saw was $409,000 a year. That's $375 a cow a year. $375. Okay? Why does that occur? The reason we see that is we need to get cows into the second, third, fourth lactation in order to maximize the amount of milk that we get out of those cows. When we're spinning those cows that fast, we don't have that many cows that are in that third lactation greater. That second lactation cow is producing 15% more milk than that first lactation cow. That third lactation cow is producing an additional 10%. So we want to get as many cows as possible into that third lactation. And yet as you review your records, how many herds are sitting at 40, 45% first lactation animals? How many herds are sitting at less than 35% of their herd in third lactation and greater? We need to spread out that milk production and maximize how many pounds of milk we get out of every cow. One of the things that I started to think about is, and I know that over in Europe this is the way they evaluate, how many pounds of milk do we produce per day of life? Think about that the next time you cull a heifer. She maybe got 200 days of milk, plus you had 2 years of raising, and then divide out the pounds of milk that she produced over those days. It'll probably be in the teens or less per day of life, how many pounds of milk she produced. Versus that cow that we can get into her fifth and sixth lactation, she'll be up in the 60 plus pounds. Spreading that fixed cost of raising a heifer for more days of life. Helps us lower that cost of production. Helps us get to that $375 additional profit per cow, which is where we want to be. Okay? So those were the 6 that keep coming up year after year after year that we focus in on. And so what does it mean? Milk production is key. We have to have energy-corrected milk. It's not pounds of fluid milk. Now, again, I work with an area that's mainly selling components. We're in the upper Midwest where we're paid on our components. My goal is every herd to be above 6 pounds of combined butter, fat, and protein per cow per day, sold. That includes those treated cows, are a part of the cow number with 0 pounds sold. But we still need to be above 6 if we're milking black and whites. Somatic cell, highly correlated with profitability. Goal, every herd I work with, below 135. It's where we need to get to. It's what our consumers are also demanding. Reproductive efficiency. It wasn't that many years ago when we thought 19 was a very acceptable level for preg rate. I don't think that's the goal anymore. There's enough things that we can do here that we can get up 25 to 28. That's where we need to be for our preg rates. Herd turnover costs are expensive. It costs a lot of money to raise a heifer. It takes a lot of days of milk to recover the cost of raising a heifer. We need to keep those animals around as long as we can in order for that cost to be spread out. No different than the fixed cost of feed, the maintenance cost for a lactating cow. We need to spread that heifer raising cost out. Heifer management is important. I don't want to raise all kinds of heifers and have all kinds of them that have metabolic problems. I need to raise the right amount of heifers, and I need to keep them healthy so that I can get the maximum return out of every one of those heifers when they hit the milking string, and the maximum number of days out of each and every one of them. So in order to achieve maximum profitability on dairies, we need to start with excellent animal husbandry. We cannot skip that. It all starts there. Now there's a lot of other side things that still, excellent animal husbandry alone will not guarantee success. There's also other outside influences that we need to look at. Capital management, risk, how we handle those things. But if we look at the production things, these are the things that we need to focus in on in order to maximize our earnings on the dairy. We're continuing to do this study. We're continuing to add information to it. It's not a terminal study. There's still things that we're trying to get additional information on as to why it's occurring the way it is. Okay? We're trying to get more information on preg rate. Is there a point of diminishing returns? Does it pay to shoot for 35 or 36% preg rate? Or is that a point of diminishing returns? We're still trying to evaluate that. Okay? We're looking at our veterinarian and our animal health costs. Right now, there's no correlation between animal health costs and profitability of a business. But we need to look at that further, because we don't know if it's because some producers are using more as consulting services versus emergency work. We're still trying to figure that out and analyze that further. So we're trying to subdivide those animal health costs and look further into what really is there anything there? Labor. As we know, that's the second or third largest cost on each and every dairy. And so we want to continue to look at that, continue to evaluate why is it that some farms can have high labor and still make a ton of money, and some have low labor costs and still make no money. And we're trying to evaluate labor turnover as part of this. as we go through and figure out what's all behind there. Are there other details that we can come up with to help us out there? Okay? And then also looking at other technology. As we implement other technology, as we implement automatic milking systems, as we implement all the various technologies that's out there, how does that affect, whether it's genomics, whatever it may be, how does that impact the profitability of a business? So it's an ongoing study that we're trying to continue to develop more and more, but this is what we have today through the 11 years that we have statistically analyzed, and we feel that we're very confident in those 6 criteria as to how important they are for your business. So with that, I would open it up for questions.
Hey, we have the mic up here, and we'll bring the mic to you if you have a question. Just raise your hand. I'll be right there.
Could you say anything more about the fact that you didn't see a correlation between total pounds of milk shipped or herd size and profitability? What, thinking about economies of scale or volume premiums or volume discounts, all those things. Could you just say what you found along those lines?
So again, as we looked at this study, other than the one herd, we're dealing with herds that were from 400 to 4,700 cows here. And as we looked at those economies, there were some that made great money that were larger, but there's also some 1,000-cow dairies in here that were top of the heap each and every year for profitability. I think in some cases, we have expanded in size before we have capitalized on efficiency. And I think the ones that have stayed a little smaller at times have focused more on the efficiency gains than just gaining the scope with the size. Now, is that going to stay? As I started evaluating the 17 and 18 data, we are starting to see some creep there. So I'm not sure that it is going to stay at a 0.06 for correlation, but that's what I have analyzed so far through 16. Then
I've got the mic. Great presentation, Steve. Question on, so I'm a dairy nutritionist. How often do you think we should be reformulating our ration strategies to try to capture those changes and fluctuations in milk components? Because February of this year, milk protein wasn't worth anything, and now it's worth
$2.45.
$2.63 is the projection for this month, so or for September. So, I mean, should we be trying to grab additional margin on dairies with ration formulation strategies?
That's a great question, and I think that. Now, I'm going to get a little bit on my soapbox, so I apologize for this. I am always offended by nutritionists that don't look at income or feed costs. And where are we at and what strategies need to be implemented. So I think it is very important that we be looking at, do we need to change our strategy because protein values have increased? Does it warrant? So for me, it's very important that nutritionists be working with the producer and understanding where that income or feed cost is. And do we have the potential to increase that margin? If so, I think we need to change the strategy.
Awesome. So I had another quick question. You alluded to it on the labor costs that you guys are going to continue to look at it. What are you seeing on a average per hundredweight on labor costs? Do you even have a metric that you're throwing out to the farms you're consulting with?
So my metric is probably going to be different than what some people may have seen or heard. When I look at labor, that includes cash wages, includes all your taxes, all your insurance, it includes all your owner draws, It includes all owner wages. And then if I start there, then I like to subdivide it into different groups. Okay? So if you're milking cows only, you have no cropping operation, you have no heifer operation. There generally we will see it run from about 210 a hundredweight of energy corrected milk up to about 235. A lot of it depends on, am I talking about parallel or rotary parlor, okay? If I'm adding the heifer enterprise onto that, I'm going to be adding another 35 to 50 cents. And then if I have a cropping operation, or if I have a cropping and a manure disposal operation, and I'm adding that all in, we can get up into the 375, 385, 100 weight range for our labor costs. So there's a lot of variability depending on what's all included.
So it depends
What their unit is.
Just agree with that last speaker. That's an outstanding presentation. I was a banker in a former life down in the South Pacific, and I wished in my former life we had you down in New Zealand. So probably just a comment around your introductions around industry. New Zealand's been a major contributor to milk growth over the last 15 or 20 years. The pleasing thing both for us in New Zealand for milk price and probably for you in the US is that I think we're past growing milk supply in New Zealand. So I think from a milk price point of view that's going to be a positive thing going forward. Just a question, I was really interested in that relationship you talked about in terms of between a cell count and turnover rate. Can you just talk that relationship through again? I sort of got the principle of the relationship, but I'm just trying to understand in more detail how that's connected to turnover rate.
Sure. So the relationship between cell count and turnover rate, what we tend to see is as your cell count gets up, we're seeing more herds turning cows over, culling cows quicker, less days that they've been on the herd, which then is going to tie back to the herd turnover cost being higher. The other thing that we tend to see is as the cell count is up, that their milk production is lower, so I have less hundredweights to divide my herd replacement cost over, which is going to drive that up.
There's also a relationship between feed efficiency and the profit coming for the milk. Due to maybe the cow have more milk, the feed efficiency is low. So how to calculation for the relationship between feed efficiency and the profit in the farm? So
what is the correlation between feed efficiency and profitability, as I'm understanding? So again, as milk production is going up, we're seeing that correlation with feed efficiency improve. The correlation between just feed cost and profitability, as we looked at this, we did not have a significant correlation at this point in time that we could say this person is doing much better with feed cost or feed efficiency to cause profitability. So, but we did look at that, yes.
Thanks, this has been great, and you allude to a little bit parlor, milk harvesting. How do you put a number to the amount of investment per cow that you can save labor going to a rotary over, and I don't even want to get into robots, but you hit it earlier, it's a big part of our expense, and how do you justify a $1 million investment in a parlor on a per hundredweight basis?
And I don't even know how to answer that question to you because every farm is so individualized, and what I'm looking at, it really is different on each and every farm to quantify that. But I do know that as I look and evaluate investment, I do look at what is that capital cost, and how much is my capital cost going to change if I have that investment. And by capital cost, now I'm going to have more interest and I'm going to have more depreciation, and I'm using management level depreciation relative to the change that I'm going to have in labor cost. And when I add the two together, am I gaining or losing ground?
So you should be able to express that
Per hundredweight basis.
So what's the lowest per hundredweight basis number that we can achieve? Maybe just strictly as a milking operation, exclude the heifer and the cropping.
I have to be honest, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I would have to go back and do a little looking. I'm sorry, but I don't have it right.
Shoot from your hip, everybody else does. Appreciate your
My guess would be that we're going to be at about 350 to 365. I'm putting the milk center and a barn on there. That's what I'm doing. So,
as far as debt servicing and everything.
yep.
Thank you.
Okay. One more over here. We have about 5 more minutes left.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask quick about expenses. Did you see any correlation between the lower profitability years and the expenses the previous year versus any rebound rate or how expenses were cut from the previous year?
So with that, so as we look at that, again, it was an accrual, so we're adjusting for prepays and so forth on that. But as far as deferred maintenance type of things or reducing expenses to get through a low-cost year, I can't say that we saw a significant difference in what herds were doing. I would say that on average, everybody did figure out a way to have less repairs in a tight cash flow year, a low earnings year, but we get beyond deferred maintenance, repairs, not a lot of changes that I saw out there.
Yes. What were the main strategies that you saw in those years that only some people make money? So what were the main things that those people do different?
So what's the main thing that people do different in low profitability years? They do the great boring things consistently. They stick to their strategies. They don't shoot from the hip. These are the processes that we go through and we follow them every day. I know it's dull and it's boring and it's not exciting like buying a new tractor or shiny paint or anything like that, but the dull, boring things that they're consistently doing end up resulting in improved earnings.
One more up here.
I'm just wondering, would you know if there's a trend over the years on specific costs that cause the cost of production to rise or fall that influence the income or on all dairies? Maybe there could be a trend, be it market or be it production cost or labor cost or whatever. Is there a trend over the years that you can see any rise or fall will cause?
So the biggest trend that I have seen as producers have really started to ratchet down their costs of production has to do with that net herd turnover cost. They have really changed their philosophy. I go back in history, too many years of doing this, but back in history we raised every heifer. It was not uncommon to see 40% turnover in herds. And we were just spinning because we produced that many heifers. Now we're using different strategies, not raising as many heifers, keeping them in the herds. There's a lot of very successful herds that are sub 30% turnover rate right now. So that's been a big strategy to lower cost of production, getting more into that second, third, and fourth lactation.
Also, some dairies operate their own heifer facilities, and some have to buy from other farmers. So, would you say that there's a difference in production or in net income compared between the dairies, or?
So, so you said some are buying versus raising, or some are
Raising.
custom raising versus raising?
Custom raising versus
Okay,
raising.
so custom raising versus raising yourself. I can't give you a definite one is better than the other. It really depends on the operation, and it depends on what we're looking at for custom grower, the standards that they're having made, and the standards that you had. There's a lot of variability that I see out there from farm to farm.
Okay, any further questions? Do you have one more?
Hi, I'm speaking as a professional AI technician for 47 years, and I've been on a number of research trials through that time. One of the takeaways from some of the trials I've been on are the added bump of 2 to 4% using a professional AI technician versus large herd in-house insemination. Is there any accounting in your program here for the added cost of technician versus paying an employee to inseminate cattle, and the additional rise in conception from using the AI technician? Any correlations or any takeaways there that you have?
I would say there is absolutely zero correlation between profitability of the farm and doing it on farm versus using an AI provider, technician. Actually, with the tightness in labor, I have a lot of the largest dairies that are going back to hiring a technician to come in and do that service, just to help them manage their business.
Okay, let's give Steve a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, a lot of great data here, a lot of things, a lot of take homes. I'm sure Steve will stick around here for a few minutes if there's some other burning questions that you have. Again, thank you. We're very pleased to sponsor this. You also are welcome to stop by the McClanahan booth outside. There'll be a free gift for you for attending this. Just bring that black card that you were given when you walked through the door. So again, thank you.